Welcome to CS1203, Database Systems 1, and this is the Unit 5 lecture part 1. During this lecture, we're going to use the OpenOffice database tool to create a database. Since we're going to have to create an actual database, and we're going to have to create tables and other structures within that database using the relations that we have created in our assignments up to this point in the class, I wanted to make sure that everyone was very familiar with and comfortable with using this particular tool. Now, as we stated in the material at the beginning of the course, if you would like to use another relational database system, that is entirely your choice. The only requirement that we have is that you need to make sure that whatever database that you're using is at least ANSI 92 compatible, and if preferable would be ANSI 2008 compatible in terms of the compatibility it has with the structured query language. The other requirement that we have is that you need to create the tables. Even though OpenOffice Database may have a feature that allows you to create tables graphically, the objective of this exercise is to learn to use the SQL language to actually create the database structures, and so therefore it is those SQL statements that are really the output of the assignment for this week. So please make sure that you follow the instructions that I'm providing or use the SQL language in the database system of your choice to create the tables and other structures that are required for this week's assignment. Now, what I'd like to do is go through the process of actually creating a database. Now, it's outside of the scope of the lecture that we're going to do today to talk about actually installing OpenOffice, although it is rather easy. And I believe that we have a link in the resources section of the course page that you can click on that link, and it's going to have a instructions there for installing OpenOffice in your local computer. Another option, if you'd like to take advantage of it, is to use the Virtual Computing Lab, and that is actually what I'm going to show you today. Is assume that we have either OpenOffice installed on our computer or make use of the Virtual Computing Lab, which every one of you has access to, and use the database and the OpenOffice database that's actually installed in the lab. So what I'm actually going to do is log into the Virtual Computing Lab and use the OpenOffice database program that is installed in the Virtual Computing Lab and do so to create the database that we're going to create today. So I'm just going to log into the OpenOffice, or into, I should say, the Virtual Computing Lab. One of the things I would like to point out is you'll notice how I have selected portal mode for the Virtual Computing Lab. I would highly recommend this. Because you get much better performance when you do so. So we're just going to kind of log into the lab environment and have it start up. Now, what we want to do here, and one of the things I'm going to point out when using the lab, that it's very important to make sure that when you create files in this environment, that you create them in your own directory area. So, for example, every login is going to have a desktop and it's going to have a documents area, as you can see on the screen. I would strongly suggest that you create those databases or files or whatever it is that you are actually using the lab for. Make sure that you create your documents in the documents folder that belongs to your account. Because if you do so, it will preserve those documents both between uses and also between classes. So it kind of becomes an area that is going to stay out there with you as you go along. Now, all I'm doing here is I'm clicking on the OpenOffice database icon to start this up. You notice that you'll have a view that looks very similar to this. The Virtual Computing Lab actually uses the 3.2 version of OpenOffice. A more current version is probably 3.3 or even beyond. But I think that you'll find that most of the steps and most of the dialog boxes that you're going to encounter are going to look very similar to what we're going to use today. So I'm going to select the Create a New Database option, click on the Next button. I really don't need to register the database, although I don't have any problem if you do so. and I'm going to open the database for editing, and I do not want to use the table wizard. So you want to pick these particular selections and then click finish, and it's going to initiate the process of creating a place for the database to exist and giving it a name. And as I stated before, what you really need to do in this case is to find your specific documents folder and put the file in there. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to click on the documents folder, and then I'm going to go up here and give my database a name. So I'm going to call it my CS1203 database DB, and then I'm going to click on the save. And that's pretty much all that we have to do to create our own database. And then you'll see that what's happened is we have opened up the OpenOffice program in a view. And what we're going to do next is we're going to go in here and select tools. Now, when you select on the tools button, you're going to notice that one of the items down here is SQL, and we want to select the SQL. Now, basically what we are going to do in the assignment for Unit 5 is we're going to have to go out and create a series of SQL statements to implement the relations that we have been created, and do so using SQL. So the way that you would want to actually write your SQL and execute your SQL to make sure that it's in fact going to function properly is using this interface, using that option under Tools to select SQL, and then we can actually just type in the SQL commands that we're going to want to have to create the table. So I'm going to create a very, very simple table. It's not going to have a lot in terms of integrity constraints. I'm not going to do a lot in terms of null or not null parameters, but keep in mind all of those things are things that you need to do as part of your assignment. But for the sake of expediency today, we're not going to do those things. So we're just going to go out and create a table. I'm going to call my table customers. And my particular table is going to have just a couple of columns in it. And the first one is going to be a customer ID, and it's going to be of type integer. I'm also going to have a customer name, and I'm going to use type varchar. Give it a size 30. And those are the two commands that I'm going to execute, or the two attributes, I should say, that I'm going to have in my table. So I'm going to go out here and click on the execute button, which is actually going to execute that particular piece of SQL. You'll notice down here that the command has executed successfully, so I'm going to close out of this. Now, what we're going to find is that I can refresh my view, and we now have a table for customers that I've just created down here. Now, if I double click it, I will be able to open that table, and you'll notice where I have my customer ID attribute and my name attribute. So this gives you just kind of a real basic introduction to getting access to OpenOffice database, using it to create our own database file, which we want to do. We've given you a little bit of an exposure to using the Virtual Computing Lab, which, as you can see, is a very functional tool to use. So if you don't have OpenOffice on your computer at home, you can use this to do the assignments in this class just as easily. And we've also given you a little bit of an introduction to how to use OpenOffice to implement and create the SQL necessary for the assignment that we have today. One further thing that we're going to do here is I'm going to close this database, which kind of gets us right back to the view. And I wanted to show you, and I'm actually going to exit right out of this, and I'm going to start up that database again, because the next thing I wanted to show you just briefly is that once I've created my database, how to go back and find it. So you notice that the most recently used database that I had out here was the one that I just opened. Okay, so I can just kind of go in here and click on, I could either click on let me go back there, finish to just open this particular database, I'm going to actually go out and show you how to make sure that you can look into your documents folder to find your database because it's in your particular area. So if it happens to come up where you do not have the most recent database used, all you want to do is you're going to go back into your documents folder, which is right here, and you notice I'm just going to double click and open it. Here we can see my CS1203 database that we just created, and I can open it. And again, we're going to click on tables, and our customers table is out there. So this gives you a real quick introduction to using OpenOffice Base or the OpenOffice database, and you can use that for completing all of your assignments for Unit 5.